Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome to our ritual night talk for May 25th. I'm Scott Stenwick, your host of these ritual night events that are presented under the auspices of Leaping Laughter OTO in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Tonight, I don't have much in the way of additional content posted in the description. I just have the link to donations. Donations are appreciated. No donation too big, no donation too small. And with that, I think I'm going to just launch into the talk for this evening, which is a continuation of our talk from last week on exotericism for living. So the deal is that exotericism is the idea that really magic shouldn't necessarily be different than anything else, in that it's a thing that you do, it's a tool that we use, and that's the way it is. Now, apparently I've got a little exoteric situation here. Shut the door of the temple, and my cat wants to get out here. So I'm going to just walk over here for a minute and let my exoteric cat out of the temple. So that is really kind of the thing that we're talking about here. Magic, daily life, just kind of all wrapped up together. And by the way, I would let her stay in the temple, but eventually she is going to start whining to get out the door. Then I would have to go do this in the middle of my talk. So I'm doing it now. Strategy. So the deal with exotericism and treating magic as something that is basically ordinary, right? It's this thing that's just kind of woven into our lives, and we just do it. You want to succeed at something. You know, you do the mundane steps that you do to succeed, and then you use magic to give yourself an edge. It's going to give you that extra kind of kick over the top, turning your effort up to 11. You know, it's like, where can you go? Nowhere, turn it to 11, that type of thing. And so that's really what we're talking about here. And so some advocates of magical secrecy make the argument that, oh, well, you know, those of us who know about magic, we should like keep it secret, right? Because, well, then like we'll have the edge and like other people won't. Okay. Well, so there is something to that argument. It's kind of like what you see in economics with what's called arbitrage, which is a lot of the way finance companies work is they identify a particular inefficiency in the market and then set up their investments to exploit that inefficiency. And the problem is once everybody knows about the arbitrage, there isn't really an inefficiency anymore, and so the trick doesn't work. You may see this in people who sell these success systems, right? Best-selling author wrote this system to be a millionaire in 5 years or something like that, right? And in some cases, these are people who did succeed at that. But the problem is that, all right, well, if they really were still succeeding at it to the degree that they were succeeding at it, they would never be selling it to you, because the more people who do it, the less their advantage is present. And so the idea is, well, okay, well, now if you can make more money selling the system to other people than you can using the system's basically dead. You know, not a lot of people are really going to be able to use it once it gets to that point. And so you can make a case like that about magic. But I would argue that there's a very simple strategy that you can use when designing your magical rituals, magical operations, and so on, that really gets around that problem completely. And the idea came up actually in a comment that I posted in response to a question that was asked in the Ceremonial Magic School group this week, which was talking about this idea of doing love spells on people, okay? I do not advocate doing love spells on specific people, in part because of ethical issues, but more because of this basic practical issue involved. Doing a spell to completely dominate somebody else's will, all right, well, it's going to have to overcome whatever resistance that they have in the first place. If they had resistance, you probably wouldn't be casting a spell on them in the first place. And in my opinion, the solution to this, how you can, if you want love, you can get love, instead of just identifying some person that you're going to basically, magically harass, set it up like a sorting problem. Okay, magic is really, really good at sorting problems. Okay, so if I do a love spell, let's say I'm calling on the spirits of Venus, and I say this, I say, bring to me a partner that is in harmony with my will and whose will I am in harmony with. Okay, at Thelemic wool phrasing, real helpful. I'll get into some other examples after this one. I'm just going with this one because this is what the question was actually about. So there's a couple of really good key things about that. First of all, if you are in a situation where the person that you like really likes you, doesn't want to say anything, et cetera, well, then it may very well be that spell brings that person to you. But it might not. It might not if, well, they don't really feel that way about you. But what it's going to do is it's going to work on a big population of all the people around you that you interact with, and it's going to do this sorting thing. It's going to bring you somebody that you're going to like and who's going to like you. Okay? This spell, this technique is also highly resistant to magical countermeasures. Okay, so let's say that you have like the mirror spell, right? That's kind of the classic defense thing. If a spell comes at you, it throws it back, right? Okay, so the thing about it is that, so let's say that you cast a spell on somebody, make person A fall in love with me, okay, and it gets mirrored. What it's going to do is it's going to bounce back and it's going to flip, and it's just going to make you more in love with them, so you're going to be more obsessed with somebody who doesn't necessarily even like you, right? Okay, let's look at the sorting problem version of that spell. Okay, well, the sorting problem is anybody this spell hits, right? Okay, if it gets reversed, okay, well, then it gets reversed into basically flipping the two phrases, you wind up with the same meaning. So it still goes from bring to me somebody that's in harmony with my will and which I'm also in harmony with theirs, which is the same effect. Okay, this is a really, really good one also getting out of the love spell area, getting over into this idea of negative magic. And for quote unquote curses, this works well too. And so one of the fairly easy things to do with cursing people is basically to just get them out of your way. Okay, I call it the Gomp spell. Okay, for get out of my face, and anybody who did programming or development on a late 80s Amiga computer knows what I'm talking about. There was a utility called Gomp on the Amiga. It stood for get out of my face. And what it did was it would allow you to dismiss certain system errors on the machine that you would run into because the Amiga did multitasking, but it didn't have protected memory, so there could be some memory overwrites and stuff. But anyway, the point is, getting somebody out of your face is really pretty much the most effective curse for you that you can cast. If you're going to go out and I'm going to be a badass magician, and I'm going to make all these people suffer because, okay, what are you really doing? Okay, you're just putting more suffering out into the world, and you're not benefiting yourself in any way. Okay, it might feel, a little good or something like that to, I messed them up or something. Maybe, but, how dumb is that? But beyond ethics, how dumb is that? What you really want, okay, is if somebody is, causing problems for you, you just want them gone, okay? And so the sorting problem version of that, again, you construct it like this, all right? Has a curse to keep so-and-so out of my way. Okay, so get so-and-so as far away from me as possible. Okay, well, if somebody casts the same curse back at you and it bounces or something, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to be kept as far away from them. It's the same effect. Okay, and also it does deal with some of these ethical ideas about magic, but it also deals with this arbitrage idea, this idea that, well, we have to keep magic secret in order to, protect, our ability to do things so that, other people don't have it. Okay. Or protect our proprietary interests because we sell people classes for bunches of money. And if the information were freely out there, well, people wouldn't necessarily buy our classes or our books or whatever. Okay. So think about the sorting problem, though, is that if you are working in something, in your life to get something working, okay, we looked at relationships. Okay, there's a way to do a love spell. You want to do a job spell, or you want to do a spell for a business, okay? I found years ago, business and I do not get along for whatever reason. I'm just not good at it, not really sure why, but not what I do. On the other hand, doing IT consulting, I'm very well off. So it's like money is not the issue at all. It's more a question of, having tried a number of businesses over the years, being affluent enough to do this and never really succeeding at it, I kind of concluded that, even with using magic, it just, for whatever reason, it's just kind of not suited to my will or something like that. But the thing is that, or at least it's not suited to my will to make my primary income from a business. I will say that because, I do have some business concerns going, and I don't necessarily think it's something where, I'm, it's just completely out of harmony or something. Obviously, things I like to do and so on. But the point being is that turning this into a sorting problem of bring to me a job that is in harmony with my will, and I like this one, and which will remain in harmony with my will. Sometimes you put a time limit on it, sometimes you don't. You want to bring a job to yourself that is going to work well for you in whatever way. And so casting that this is the sorting thing, right? It's going to find a job that's going to be good for what you're looking for, and you're not going to find it that onerous because it's going to be in harmony with your nature. Okay? And the thing about this is, even if every single job applicant out there is doing this spell, all they're doing is sorting stuff more efficiently. And that doesn't really hurt you. It's not like a situation where there's one job you're applying for, and either you have magic or you and 3 other applicants are using magic. It's a different situation than that. And these sorting problems are really helpful. Okay. For business, you can do something similar. Bring to me a business opportunity that is in harmony with my will and which will remain in harmony with my will. You can phrase it like that if you're looking at using the same technique for a business. Okay. If you are in a business and you're wanting to get more sales, all right, bring sales to us that are in harmony with our business model, especially if, you already said, bring this to me that's in harmony with my will. Okay, again, this is stuff where, your business is going to do better no matter what. You're going to do better no matter what. And basically the point is that there's really nothing to fear from magic getting out there into the world in a way that, is going to somehow disadvantage you. Really, and now on the other hand, it also isn't true that in some fantasy novels that, the more people that use magic, the more powerful it gets for each individual person. That's not a real thing. If it's just like, it's not a real thing that, I can't be affected by magic because I don't believe in it. Really? I'm like, well, it believes in you, right? It's whether or not it's something that you think can happen, it's a thing that happens. And like I've mentioned, for example, this idea that people who start doing magic, seems like they're attracting spirits or something like this. That's not really what's going on. What's really going on is you're developing your magical and psychic abilities, which they're very closely related. And what's happening is that your psychic senses are starting to turn on. And now you're starting to, oh my God, there's like spirits and stuff all over the place. Yes, there are. It's just like that. It doesn't have to do with you doing magic and attracting anything. What it has to do with is, it has to do with, that with your psychic senses not really activated, you just don't notice it. And so it's really nothing to be afraid of. Really, you should be less afraid of actually being able to see what's going on, because otherwise you wouldn't, and it would still be going on. So that's important to keep in mind. Okay. Another really, really good technique, but this is a technique, it does involve an element of risk to a degree. Okay, so let me talk about a little bit about the thelemic idea of true will. Okay, I have talked about this on other of these talks, but so there are some mistakes, or I think ideas people have about this that aren't necessarily quite right. So some people talk about true will like it's a task. Okay, like you incarnated here to do exactly one thing, and doing your true will is just doing that thing to the exclusion of everything else. I do not believe that is true. I don't think that's how it works. I think that true will is more like a vector, and it can change direction from moment to moment. And the point of it being true will is it's what has the greatest intensity of the various vectors available to you pointing in various directions. In physics, a vector is a quantity, that is the intensity of it, and a direction, which here, doesn't really fit in a coordinate system, but the direction is kind of the path that your life should take. So you got this path that is like really best and most harmonious for you. But you don't automatically follow that. There's other stuff you're conditioned to do one thing versus the other. Okay, our society tells us certain things. Our parents tell us certain things. Other religions tell us certain things about what you have to do to be good, what you have to do to be successful, and all this kind of stuff. And true will isn't necessarily in line with that. You can do something that's not in harmony with your true will. And what's going to happen is you're going to run into friction and problems and all kinds of stuff. Whereas, in theory, if you're following your true will, kind of like, the idea of following the Tao, but not exactly the same, what's going to happen is that your life is going to go in a more harmonious direction, and you're going to be more successful in the context of what you really consider successful. Because what this is about finding the path that is in best harmony with your true fundamental nature. Okay, so long workaround to get to this next piece. Okay, so one of the things that I've been talking about on my blog is with your daily practices. I talked a little bit about that. You're good exotericist. You do your, 30 minutes of daily practice a day, ceremonial stuff, your meditation, and you're good. It's like that is a very effective practice sequence. It puts you ahead of the vast majority of people out there who maybe say they're magicians, and what they do is, they study stuff, and, maybe they do a ritual every once in a while. It's like, if you're doing that stuff daily, it's like you are on the path. You are on a much better path. Now, it might be, the concept of true will, it might be that you find some other form of practice similar to the ceremonial work that does a similar kind of thing from a completely different tradition. You might do a different kind of meditation than mindfulness meditation. There are a lot of different spiritual paths you can walk. And again, Thelema is not really about saying, oh, well, that path you're doing is wrong. Well, if it's in harmony with your will, it's good, right? So the thing about it is this. One of the things with daily practice that can really help is to have a basic statement of intent after you do whatever ceremonial, energy raising, whatever kind of work you do. Okay. One of the ones that I like to use is bring me to the accomplishment of the great work, the summum bonum, true wisdom and perfect happiness, which Thelemites on here will recognize as it's part of the benediction from Crowley's Gnostic Mass. The other piece that I use, though, which is really kind of what I'm trying to get around to ahead of that, is set my true will in motion. Okay, that's an evocation. That's a conjuration. I'm not really calling it a spirit because I'm directing my own power that way. But the idea is that, my spiritual self has an idea of what my true will is. And I'm mobilizing the power that I'm putting into my daily practice, not just to transform myself, but to transform the world around me in line with my true will. Okay. So it's another one of these kind of bootstrappy things that you could do with the will concept. And let me say, when I started doing this, okay, I had one job, I lost the job, I was out of work for a few months, I got another job. But you know what? The other job I got was so much better. Okay. And it really was the job that kind of set in motion my career, up until now. I mean, working in the healthcare industry, working as, an IT consultant and stuff like that. Whereas, I had gone from being, a more run-of-the-mill developer over to, a higher level consulting kind of job. And it's like, okay, so that's cool. And, there were a lot of things about it that kind of worked out. Now, I will say that job wound up, it was really, really good for about a year. And then it started kind of going downhill after that. And at the time, I was just doing bring me a job that is in harmony with my will. And so it was that job that prompted me to add and will remain in harmony with my will. Okay. And so the point of that is to add a little more permanence onto the job. When you see a job starting to go downhill, you can be, all right, do some magic to bring this job back in line with my will. Or you can look at what happens just off the basics, set my true will in motion and see what starts to happen in your life. Okay. You very much can lead to being pushed kind of outside your comfort zone there, which is okay as long as you're not doing it to the point where it's detrimental to you. It's fine to get outside your comfort zone, but it's not true that the further you get outside your comfort zone, the better it is. That also is not true. That's like that's like, okay, well, I'm going to make this sweat lodge extra hot because it's not for wussies and then a couple people die. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. But set my true will in motion, okay? And let me tell you, if you really contemplate it, first time you do it, it is a little scary. You'd be like, all right, well, I don't know. What if my true will is to be something that I have absolutely no idea? And here's the thing. Usually, the deal is that figuring out your true will is not necessarily super hard, okay? Crowley writes, you have to have these mystical realizations about this and this and this. And all those things help. Absolutely. All those things help. Okay, they definitely do. But really, because the way your true will works is that, you get kind of the least friction when you follow that path. One of the things you can kind of look at is, all right, well, what areas am I naturally good at? And what area I'm naturally good at, that's actually a really good test, okay? So, if you are, let's say that, you're, a really good writer and, you're like working at like a store, just doing like a regular retail job. Okay. And you're not very good at the retail job and you kind of hate it. But, you get home and you write and you're really good at writing. Well, you know what? Your true will is probably in the direction of writing. Okay. If you're going to set my true will in motion at that. Okay. What may very well happen is you might wind up losing the job at the store and having more time to write. Okay, the problem there being, all right, how do you make money? Because unfortunately, our society is not set up to really do anything worthwhile with the arts. But okay, but part of your true will is also to survive. So maybe let's say you're working at like, I don't know, just any kind of a random store or something like that. Okay, you wind up losing that job, and all of a sudden this opportunity comes your way to work in a bookstore where, okay, you can apply for a job at a bookstore. Okay, you're maybe not going to just be a clerk. You maybe would have the opportunity to do some stuff like talk to and deal with authors, maybe coming in to do talks, things like that. Okay, that could be something where, all right, so you still have a job that's making you money, but if your true will is in this direction of writing, it's like, hey, okay, so I could be around books, I could be around authors, I can meet people. In order to be successful in writing, you absolutely need to have connections, and it's practically impossible without it. So that's good, right? If you can meet and make a positive impression on people who are already working in the field, okay, there's an opportunity for, okay, well, maybe you build up enough of those connections, you finally get to a point where, oh, hey, so I actually can, put this book out there and have some success with it. And, you, of course, you would write at the same time as doing your day job. I do that. My day job's in computers, but, I write while I do my day job. And basically, in my case, it's like, well, I'm good at writing. I enjoy writing. I also am good at programming computers. I enjoy programming computers. So my jobs are going to wind up in that direction because they're going to provide the best benefit for me. And I think that's kind of how the true will thing shakes out with the set my true will in motion, which I do every day as part of my daily practice. And it's one of those things where I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it to people who are just starting out. I actually think, bring me to the accomplishment, to the great work, the sum and bone of true wisdom and perfect happiness is a better statement when you're starting out and kind of getting your practice stabilized and formalized, and you got your life moving fairly smoothly. Okay, at that point, now you can start adding in set my true will in motion and then see what the momentum that you build up, see where that goes. And so probably what's going to happen, you will move somewhat out of your comfort zone, but not as much as you might fear. And what's going to happen is down the line, you're going to find yourself in a better position for being able to do the things you want to do and live the kind of life you want to live. And that is exotericism, people. Use magic to just generally make your life better by using magic, okay? So the whole idea in Thelema of, if everybody did their true will, the idea is there would be quote unquote no clashing, which I think is probably unrealistic. But I really think there would be less clashing. I think that if everybody was really kind of on this path where, their true will was laid out, was where they were working in harmony with their true will instead of fighting against it. And, we weren't necessarily as constrained by some of these ideas that, society and religion puts on us that, if you look at the utility of them, they're basically pointless. Okay. I think we would be in a situation there where many, many more people would be happy. The world would work better. Things would run better. Things would be more smooth, and so on. And at the same time, everybody could be free to be themselves. Idealistic, I know, because of course, you're not going to see a universal application of it. But I think something like an exotericism movement is really the closest thing we can get to a solution that, if it were to break through into the larger society, you could get to a point where more people were doing their true will and we would see things run better. Okay. I really think that's true. And so that's kind of where, brings me to, why is it that, you think, why is it that you think this is a good idea? Why do you think secrecy is bad? Why do you think gatekeeping is bad? And that's really where it gets to. Ideally, as a Thelemite, I would like to see every single person on this planet living according to their true will. That's what I would like to see. I'm not going to see it, okay, in my life. It's in the benediction, may everyone have, light, life, love, and liberty, under the law of Thelema. That's what that means. Under doesn't mean oppressed by. It's more like life, light, love, and liberty are foundational to the law of Thelema. So the foundation is under the building. It's more like that. Also, love under will is like that. But anyway, so secrecy, gatekeeping are a problem. And I'm going to talk about another question that came up. This was actually on my blog again, about this idea of, so without exotericism, there's this problem, okay? And if you're a magical student, you've probably come across it. The problem is this. So we don't have anything like a general theory of magic, okay? So we don't really have a good experimental framework to sit down. Somebody says, magic works like this, okay? Well, how do we test that? Okay, and the answer of most people at this point is still, well, you kind of can't, or you can test it to a degree, but it's not, scientifically valid because you don't really have a model that you're developing a hypothesis for and working against. A lot of it is still more like, do spells, consider a bunch of different, change some variables around, look at their probabilistic effectiveness and so on. So basically, it puts magic in the category of things like psychology studies, trying to look at things like attitudes and cognitions that we just can't measure those things. Or we can only measure things by, off measurements, like some versions of self-report. I mean, I think that probably there's some way to use an EEG type thing and then have people cast spells, then look at which ones are the most effective and link them back some way to EEG patterns. Again, without a huge sample size, so that's not very relevant. And so the problem is, what winds up getting mistaken for expertise is loudness. Okay, if you say magic works like this and you sound absolutely confident, okay, it doesn't necessarily matter what you're saying, since there isn't really a way to test it. People are going to think, oh, people are going to think, oh, well, they're really confident. They must know what they're talking about. And because we got secrecy and we got gatekeeping, it can be hard to find even, conflicting opinions. Now, or more to the point, conflicting opinions that have some foundation. I'm on the internet. Of course, you can find conflicting opinions all over the place, but you really don't know until you test it. Okay, and that's the thing. So what winds up happening is you listen to one person and they say magic works like this, and you try it their way. You maybe get some results. They're not really what you were hoping for. So you talk to them, oh, well, actually, so-and-so is completely wrong. How you really should do magic is this. Okay, and so what happens is that with the way everything is set up and structured, without a real, scientific or scientific-like underpinning, what's going on is that as a student, okay, you can learn the system, oh, but then you're told, oh, this thing you learned, it's wrong. Oh, well, so now I got to go back and relearn this. And that process can continue multiple times. So it's like, you take a step forward and you kind of get pulled back, or at least you're made to question. Okay, if there were a magical establishment akin to the scientific establishment, okay, all establishments do have issues with politics. That's an unfortunate thing, but they are much more reliable than random stuff on the internet. It's like comparing, oh, I'm going to go out and research my theory, and you watch a couple of poorly sourced YouTube things versus, you're going to start reading academic papers coming out of the scientific establishment. Obviously, the second, you're going to get much better information because, got people on YouTube can say anything. I mean, look at me, right? So, the thing about that, though, is, and what I try to do with my recommendations about magic, I'd be like, all right, we'll test this, see what happens. And I mean, wow, that really didn't work the way way you explained it. And I'm like, that's interesting. Instead of doubling down on, oh, you're doing it wrong, I'm like, that's interesting that you have that data. Let me see if I can look at, from the standpoint of the models that I work with, which granted are not validated, but I do have a model that I compare magic to. And if we've got some data that looks like it's completely contradicting the model, I look at, all right, well, what can we do with the model? What might explain that? What's the difference about this situation? What might the difference be about this individual? And that's the right attitude. Okay. There's an old cartoon from Dilbert by Scott Adams. And Scott Adams, he kind of politically went off the deep end, the last few years. But, I liked his stuff for years, and his comics are still funny. And one of the things that he pointed out is that in a business or office environment, the key to being successful in a business meeting is that everything you say, you want it to communicate, I am worthy of promotion, and provide no other information. Any other information you provide could get you in trouble because it could be challenged. Okay? Now, compare that to online magicians out there on forums, right? Trying to communicate, I am the person you should buy this book from. and communicating no other information. Or I am the person you should buy this class from, and communicating no other information. With the whole secrecy thing, how would you know? They sound confident, right? They must be talking about something that works. And to be fair, some teachers are. I'm not necessarily saying that all the people out there on the internet who are promoting classes or anything like that, many of them do know what they're talking about. Many of them, I have looked at their material, I've picked things up from myself and integrated into my own practice. And so it's not really an indictment of teachers per se, okay? But it's an indictment of a couple of things. I mean, number one, your personal political status in a milieu or a group or something, that really doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with how good a magician you are. You might think that it does, but the problem is that, the mundane things that people do to build up status and so on, they could vary a lot by individual, okay? Personally, I don't have a lot of that kind of, in a group, status, drive, charisma kind of thing, in part because status isn't really what drives me. Okay. I'm, well enough off that I'm not really that desperate or worried about making sales. I would like the work I put out there in my books, which are not that expensive. I mean, compared to classes, and a Nokian master class I've got, very inexpensive compared to many of the classes out there. And there's 2 other people on it, not just me. And so it's one of these things where, I just try to put the information up there. If you go to my blog, look at Magical Instruction, you can read all my comments on rituals just going way back. And the thing about it is that I want the information to be out there so people can use it, okay? I don't necessarily care about getting to a point where, I'm making my entire living, selling magic books and magic supplies. I think that, unless you're basically independently wealthy, I think that kind of ties you up into this whole spiral and stuff. And that's one of the reasons that I don't do, paid spells for people and stuff like that. I don't sell magical supplies. I sell some books and some classes, through distributors that I don't stock or whatnot. Basically, I don't want to put myself in a position where, I'm hustling doing this stuff, because I think the danger of that is it starts turning into I'll get more sales if I make more notoriety online. So what I'll do is I'll just get on here and assert how awesome I am and how wrong everybody else is. And then everybody will argue with me, but people will see that and they'll see my confidence and think, oh, well, I'm going to buy from them because, they're worthy of being bought from. Maybe. That's an issue. And, I think looking back, that may very well be part of what the original idea was. Certainly in Wicca, they talked about this where, nobody charges for teaching. Crowley's layout of the AA, there were some fees, but they were very small. I do think that can go way too far. Like, well, you're a magic teacher and you need to spend all your time working with the students, but we're not going to pay you anything because the tradition says we can't pay you anything. All right, you live in America. If you're not independently wealthy, how do you make a living? And that's a real consideration. It's the physical world pushes back, right? It's like, so, it's not just, I'll be like a toxic positivity secret person and I'll think all positive thoughts and then, what, I can put my hand through a door. I mean, it really is one of these things where, and I'm exaggerating that completely. I don't think there are secret people who really think that if they're positive enough, their hand will go through a door, like pass through it, not like, punch through it, but like just pass through it, pass back out, and not leave a hole, some kind of, supernatural thing, right? But it is true that, we have to contend with our material circumstances. We have to contend with the circumstances into which we are born. Okay, I mean, I'm a well-off person, but I mean, I did not grow up in poverty. I come from a relatively well-off family. And so I had a lot of advantages going in that, not everybody has. And, so and then that gets back to the, if you're such a good magician, why are you poor? Which is another one that I have talked about. So there's all these assumptions in there, right? So the assumption is, well, obviously everybody wants to be rich. So everybody's trying to be rich. So everybody's doing everything they can to be rich. And you say you can do magic, which helps you do everything. Well, why can't you just use your magic to make you rich? Well, I don't know. Maybe you don't want to be one of those people who thinks about nothing but money all the time, which is kind of what you have to do if you want to really be upwardly mobile like that. Maybe you're just, completely content with how you're living. You don't need anything more expensive. And you just want to have more of the freedom to be yourself. You don't want to be sitting here working, 50, 60 hours a week at some job, even a high paying one. There's all kinds of things about that. I mean, even Crowley talked about this. It's like, so a person, could be, obsessed with social status, even though it's not their true will, and it wouldn't really make them happy. And, what would really make them happy is, if they just ran away and lived in an attic with a lover or something like that. Okay. And that is completely valid. There isn't this thing of, it's not the true will Olympics, right? Well, my true will is to be important, or something, right? In theory, I think that, if you really follow your true will in a field and you apply yourself to that, I think you can become important in the field. Or, alternately, you can be in a place where, maybe you don't really care that much about fame. I'm one of these people who, I would be happy if the books were getting out there, people were reading them, I'd like to get fair compensation for them, but, I'm not going to charge a fortune for them or anything like that. And I would just like the information to be out there so people can see it and use it. And, hopefully you acknowledge that, okay, well, here, this actually comes from Stenwick and so on. I guess, maybe that's, wanting to be important in the sense of, I think there's a lot of unscientific magic out there. And I'm one of the people advocating it. So obviously, I'm one of the people who would like to have their ideas influence the conversation. But I really don't care very much about personal fame. I actually don't. I think the idea of, oh, I'm going to go to the store and people are going to recognize me and people would want my autographs or people would take pictures. That sounds terrible, actually. And some people would absolutely thrive on that. Your dream is to be, like an Instagram influencer or something. And that's not necessarily silly. True will can be anything. And those people certainly can have, a positive role on the people who follow them, watch them, and so on. I don't like to dismiss anything because I think that our human nature is variable and, people can be good at all sorts of things, whether or not, it's something that our society thinks is valuable or important or, serious or, what have you. And so set my true will in motion. That's where that kind of all comes around to. And so in the beginning, get your practices solid, set it yourself up. So for your own happiness and so forth. And I do actually use the two together. So I say, set my true will in motion, bring me to the accomplishment of the great work, the sum and bone of true wisdom and perfect happiness. So I'm adding a positive spin to this true will thing that in theory could be anything and could result in some kind of veer way off. But I want to make sure that, it's not necessarily something that's so far out there that I'm not going to be able to, handle it or whatnot. And so that actually gets back to one other point about this whole idea of, poor versus rich magicians. Okay. Basically, I think Jason Miller, who is one teacher who I've taken some ideas from. I don't agree with him on everything, but generally speaking, he is a pretty good teacher as far as magic. He really focuses on meditation and such. And I think that getting that foundational practice down, I think is really important. And not every teacher emphasizes it. As possible, I don't emphasize it enough. I mention it, and but I don't talk about it to quite the same extent. At any rate, basically his point is this. It's not that a magician should be rich, but a magician should be able to, and I quote, handle their shit. Okay. One of the problems is that, so we live in a society where, there's a lot of precariousness for people who aren't already wealthy, okay? Not necessarily in terms of just, complete collapse of your life, but in terms of being able to maintain your social standing. As wages have been doing this kind of thing outside of my industry. It's like IT wages go up, but it's like other industries, not so much, okay? And, not everybody's will is going to be to work in IT. And so the thing about that is that you want to be strategic enough that if a problem or crisis arises, you can deal with it, okay? There's like this study that shows like some really high percentage of Americans like couldn't come up with a few $100s to handle an emergency. Okay, even if you're a magician, okay, if you're in that situation and you're thinking, oh, if an emergency happens, I'll just use magic, that's maybe not the right way to think about it. You should see, if you can, the degree to which, you can prepare for things and so on. Put, some amount of money aside for, whatever emergency might have to come up. And then, all right, so you have the emergency come up, you have to use magic to make it go better. And maybe you only have to use half your money, then you got half your money left over. Okay, that's still good, right? So stuff like that's a sort of, handling your shit kind of thing. And by the way, this does not mean like some of these like, wealth gurus are going to add, well, if you just didn't drink a latte in the morning, you would save enough money to, it's like, well, maybe if you add that all up, but come on, you're really not talking about enough to make a huge difference in your life. Maybe enough to put away a few $100s for an emergency. I will grant that. But, self-denial is usually not a good way to do things. If we're talking about operating from the standpoint of true will, we should be looking at things like, development of ourselves through joy, as one of Crowley's commentaries puts it. That's what we should be doing. We should be focusing on the things that make us happy and excited and ecstatic and motivated. You focus on that, okay? And are reasonably cognizant of the practical realities around it, okay? You can't just follow your passion and not pay attention to anything else, because we don't live in a society where everybody does their true will yet. Maybe if we did, you could. But you do have to be relatively practically cognizant about things. But at the same time, go with what motivates you, because it's going to motivate you and you're going to do better. Or, find a way that, something you're excited about that maybe isn't the thing you're most excited about, but which works. I would probably say that there are a number of ways in which I like writing stories better than programming computers, but I'm good at both. And writing stories with the way things are set up does not pay very well. And programming computers pays very well. So even if I would maybe rather be writing than programming a computer, I like it enough that the trade-off is by far worth it in terms of my overall life, my overall standard of living, and all that. And really the overall standard of living that I want to have, that really I feel is in harmony with my will, and that I think it's important to maintain. And so that's really what goes into it. So we got sorting problems. Use your true will. Go after your true will. When you're ready, use your practices to shape your life in the direction of your true will without really specifying what it is, and see what happens. And finally, when you do something, take care of all the mundane stuff and then throw your spell. Because throwing the spell, taking the mundane stuff, the actions you did, turns it up to 11. 11, 11, 11 across the board, one louder. And sometimes more than one if you're a good magician. Maybe it's a couple louder, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 13. Anyway, the point is, you'll get better as you practice, you'll get better as you work with it, and your life will get better as you use it. And I am convinced that is true for just about everyone. And that's why I recommend highly, as much as I possibly can, this whole idea of exotericism for living. All right, I'm going to wrap up there. I'm at about 48 minutes, yeah, probably 45 with the time to let the cat out. And so what I'm going to say there is I'm going to just wrap up with, we got the donation link. If you can donate, that's awesome. If you can't, don't worry about it. But, every donation, no matter how small, helps support our lodge. I see we have Jennifer here in the comments commented that she made a donation. Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. And with that, I'm going to sign off for tonight. So stay tuned for more of these ritual night events. And the video will eventually get posted over on Facebook like we've been doing with these other ones. We're just trying to, this transition to YouTube seems to be going pretty well. So we're going to be continuing to do it. And, one of the things that's nice about it, I think, is that, with Facebook, it's like, okay, well, you have to have a Facebook account, and some people just aren't on Facebook. And YouTube, well, it's still, owned by Google. It's a big tech company. It's a little bit more open as far as being able to share links and stuff like that. So that's our reasoning behind it. It's a little more open. Seems like it works better. Also, it seems to be more stable. We haven't had any connection problems with this at all. And I suppose it's really no surprise that YouTube has been supporting this a lot longer than Facebook has. So they'd have more of the bugs worked out. So at any rate, thank you all very much for being here. And thank you for watching, and have a great rest of the evening. Love is the law, love under will.